Hello, and welcome to the first of 8 podcast episodes talking around EOS. This is Traction Talks, and today I'm joined by Kat Wellum-Kent. Hi, Kat.
Hey, Kieran, how you doing?
Very good, thanks, very good. So I'll give a brief introduction to myself and then I'm going to let Kat introduce herself around EOS. The journey we're going to go on together over these 8 episodes is going to touch on all the key components of what the Entrepreneurial Operating System is. So my personal journey is that, well, I'm recording this currently from Atlanta in Georgia, despite being a UK accountant. That's one of the benefits that EOS has given me. Equally, last year I represented Great Britain in triathlon. Again, another thing that through EOS has allowed me to release myself from the business to focus on other things and enjoy the adventures around life, not just in the accountancy firm. So that's the benefit that EOS has given me. What's been your story? What's your EOS story? What's it giving you? Tell the audience.
Yeah, so I started my business in 2023 and I started to implement EOS right from the get-go because I really wanted a framework or something to help me build the business in the way that I wanted to do. So I guess it gave me the structure and the confidence to help grow that business and bring the team along with me as they grew too.
I love that idea, isn't it? I love a framework as well. Some order and structure to what we do. Do you think that's an accountant's thought process, or do you think that's something else?
I don't know, maybe. Yeah, maybe. Although I've got quite a few of my clients use EOS as well, and they're much more creative as well, but they like it because it helps contain them from going off all over the place. I think a framework's good for everyone. Yeah.
So in this episode, what we're going to do is we're going to talk through the 6 key components of EOS, just give basically a brief overview, and then in the next 6 episodes after that, we're going to deep dive into each of those. So really, this is going to be a top level discussion, and hopefully, Kat, you're going to help me to sort of articulate that to others so they understand, what is EOS, why might it be useful, what situations does it work in, etc. So I guess maybe let's start at the beginning. It's for somebody who has absolutely no idea what EOS is. How would you describe it?
I would describe it as a really simple blueprint to help you think about all the different aspects of the business to help you move it forward. And it's also it's not something that's just for you. It's something for everyone in the organisation. It's something that, your whole team can get involved in behind to drive you forwards to whatever your ultimate goal is.
I think I can't remember the exact terminology, EOS Worldwide, who sort of created this, termed it, but effectively they really focus in on those 6 key components and on the fact that the outcome is hopefully that the business leader will achieve their vision. That's the kind of goal of implementing it, I guess. So why do you think, obviously you're an accountancy firm, why is it valuable for accountancy firms? Why does it make EOS useful?
I think we as accountancy firm leaders are often really bad about thinking about our firm or our business as a business. We're often just busy doing all of the things and helping other people's businesses. And I think for me, EOS has helped me prioritise and put things in place to make sure that I'm focusing time on my business and what I want to do. So I think that's a really key component of it. I think also that particularly at the moment, there's lots of change and opportunities that make focusing on the business and how you want to adapt and change it over the coming years even more important. What about you?
So what do you see as the big change? Big changes that are sort of spurring that.
For me, in particular, and then what we do, like AI, and just how we can use that, we can use that to add value. I also think there's an element of making sure our service, the added value that we can bring, is really important, because I don't know about you, but I'm getting clients going, I've just ChatGPT'd I don't know, revenue recognition or something, and they come up with all this stuff and you're just like, yeah, okay, and then you have to, bring it back to what you know as an accountant, because AI is great, but it has its limitations in certain areas. So I think AI is the big one for me.
Yeah, I think it's interesting with what you said about AI there, because I think from that perspective, you've kind of got to have the grounded knowledge first, and then you can use AI to speed up your research. But I don't believe you can use it, at least not in its current form, maybe in the future we'll see, to give you the answers when you don't have the knowledge to know what questions to ask to get the right answers. Some knowledge is sometimes worse than no knowledge.
Yes. Yeah, no, I completely agree.
I think I agree with you, Kat, because, I don't come from an accounting background myself. So when I was setting up Stryde and we started working through, I was just trying to run it as a business. A typical accountancy firm has a very sort of triangular approach with effectively whoever the founding partner is, if it's a single person, for example, just ends up at the top of this triangle with work slowly being, the lesser complex work that's slowly being passed down that triangle. And I really wanted to move away from that and have a business structure that was a business, not a firm specifically, because I felt like that was one of our things is our core principles is that we're not trying to be accountants. We're trying to solve the problem of financial clarity, because AI might take over certain things that where we see ourselves as accountants. It might take over that side of things. So it's about, okay, but there will always be a need for a business owner to understand the numbers in the business, whether that's through what we currently see as accountancy or not. So I guess EOS gives a structure to be able to design that business in a way that can kind of maneuver and be agile around that. But also, I think from my perspective, there's like a shared terminology there as well, isn't there? That if you use a specific framework to your business, it allows you to share that with the team and to communicate in a way that is uniform across the business, so that other leaders in the business can understand what you're saying and can pass that on in the same way, rather than sort of reinterpreting it and explaining it in a slightly different way to somebody else. So it creates quite a lot of clarity within the business, I believe.
Yeah. And I think also, I was just going to add, because we work closely with businesses and give them a lot of advice and support to help them grow, I've found using the EOS framework and understanding it better actually helps me in those conversations as well. It gives me a way of thinking about problems and solving them, thinking about people challenges, even though that's not necessarily my role. If you're having a conversation with a business owner, all these things come up, and actually it makes the advice and my interactions with clients better from having an understanding of this framework.
So what you kind of talked a little bit about this, but what first attracted you to EOS specifically?
Well, so when I started the business, the first person I had join my team, he was kind of like a co-founder and another CFO, and he'd used it in some of his other businesses, so he kind of introduced me to it. And we first started using it as like a meeting cadence. It was just to give an idea of the weekly meetings, the quarterlies and the annuals, and to give a structured agenda. And that's where we first started using it. And then, so we kind of started at the end almost of the traction element, and then worked our way back to some of the others. So yeah, that was how we kind of came into it. And everything that I did, and the more I found out, it just seems very simple and adaptable, and not something that you have to spend loads of time and go all in on it. It just feels like you can pick things and follow that completely, and other bits where you can be like, oh, we'll follow the spirit of that and tweak it. Like, that's how we kind of use it, rather than going, oh, EOS says we must do this, so we've got to do that to make it work. It feels like it can blend and fit in with how you want to run your business as well.
I guess for us, one of the attractions for me was pretty much what I've said, which is around sort of that consistency to the team. But I think I love a framework. I love boundaries to work within. And I think maybe that's a personality thing, we talked about that earlier, but I really just liked knowing that there was I didn't have to recreate the wheel for something that somebody had already done. When I first started Stryde, we went through a process where I was trying to reinvent the wheel in just about every part of the business, and it just was a mess. And then as you start adopting proven processes, suddenly things tidy up, things connect, and I think that's what really attracted me, I guess, to it. So obviously people watching are going to go, or listen to this, are going to go, okay, great, you talked about EOS, so what is fundamentally, what are the kind of, let's break down EOS into its kind of core components and talk a little bit about each of those. So the first one is vision. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I guess the vision element of it, there's a number of different kind of components or elements to that. So we look at it on an annual basis, and it's thinking about like your core values, which I think a lot of people do, but it just gets you thinking about what's important for your business, thinking about your purpose and what you want to achieve, your niche, where you're focusing, your kind of core marketing, like uniques, what makes you stand out. I think I probably missed some, like, because those are the main ones that I remember from working through our vision. But for me it helps give that clarity of making sure we're focusing in on the right areas, and there's some structure behind it, rather than just having a big picture one-liner that you talk about that doesn't actually translate down into anything.
Was that the first time you set your vision in your business? Was it through using EOS?
Yes. yeah, I got ideas, but it wasn't the process and setting it this way just gave me a lot more clarity, I guess, of where we wanted to get to. So yeah, what about?
So we're 10 years old now. We set our vision. So we actually, I'll ignore vision, because vision kind of for us has kind of been an evolving process until now. This is probably the first time we've properly set the vision. But our core values, we set those 4 times. A lot of it linked with marketing efforts and sort of trying to find out, trying to align it with your client avatar, etc. And every single time it was very much a paper exercise until EOS. And suddenly it seemed to then, as soon as we did it through EOS, it seemed to permeate every part of the business, where the decisions you make about how you interact with your clients, what you reward for your staff, and I don't just mean sort of with physical rules, I mean in terms of going, well done for that, you're starting to reward the things where people are living out those values. And it's probably more on the airy-fairy side of stuff, but it's very interesting to see the impact of just having real clarity over those and being really specific that that's who you are. Have you had a similar experience with yours, or have you found your core values?
I think ours are still evolving, because when we first set them, or when I first thought about values, it was before we'd really thought about EOS, and they weren't really the business's core values, they were more my core values that I wanted to bring to business. And I feel like now we're 2 and a bit years old, so it's still not very old, and we've got the teams growing, those values are evolving, because it's not just me, it's kind of getting changed by the team that are joining, the clients that we're working with. So yeah, it is evolving, and I'd say we probably are not quite there in terms of that clarity, because we're still kind of finding our feet, like they're almost adapting and changing, at least on an annual basis. We're tweaking them, and we're getting closer to what actually they really are.
I think probably most businesses, especially when you're in the early stages, are going to go through that, aren't you? Because you're still in that trying to find where you fit. You might have the client, and you might know the service you fit best, but it's the proposition of how you separate yourself from somebody else, and what those values are going to underpin that, aren't they? In terms of what makes you engage with somebody else, and if you've got shared values, you're going to engage better with those types of people, aren't you? So you're almost kind of, the more clients you get, the more it kind of either reaffirms or says, actually, that maybe that value isn't quite worded right.
Yeah, and I find that actually, just in terms of those, when you're having conversations with clients, certain phrases or certain ways of approaching things come up, and then you're like, oh, actually, that's maybe the kind of the value and where we should be going on that. So yeah, definitely an evolution.
Excellent. Talking about sharing it with your people, the next component of the Entrepreneurial Operating System is people. So do you want to talk to us about what you know about the people component at the moment?
So the phrase that has permeated throughout, well, definitely in the SLT kind of conversations we have, is like right people, right seat, and wanting capability. That's something that we talk about a lot. Because you know a lot more about the EOS than I do, I think. Does the right people, right seat, is that an EOS thing, or is that a Jim Collins thing? Because I know it from Jim Collins.
Well, EOS has been built on many other principles, one of them being some of Jim Collins' work, so okay. It's probably both. Yeah, so it's probably come from originally from that. Yeah, I think it's so. Actually, I just thought it might be worth mentioning. So we've skipped a little bit from the vision piece. There's 2 tools that EOS use on the vision piece. One's called the accountability chart, which is a bit like an organisational structure that allows you to put your people in the right places, and that's quite important. And the other one is in the people area, is the people analyzer, right, which is around what you've said there, which is, do they align with your core values, and do they get it, do they want it, and do they have the capacity to do it? And it helps you to analyse, are they the right person for my business in that. Have you implemented both of those in the business? Have you used both of those tools?
Yes. I sometimes feel like when if someone says, have I implemented it, I'm like, oh no, not really, but we do. Like, say if we're recruiting, we think about it in that context, where we've had issues where it hasn't quite been working with someone, we look at it through that lens. And I've found personally that's been really helpful, because particularly sometimes if it's the right person, wrong seat, it helps, I don't know, just make the conversation a little bit easier. And
just to find a bit more around that. So just for people that might not understand what that means, right person, wrong seat, what does that mean? So how we take that is, they're the right person for your organisation, i.e. they align with your core values and what you want to achieve,
but the role and the tasks that you're asking for them, it's not the right fit for what they are capable of doing or got the ability to do, etc. So it could be that that person is absolutely right for your organisation, and completely is aligned with your values, but you're asking them to do the wrong stuff. So you can kind of, in some instances, you can kind of tweak their role and go, actually, you're better at this, so let's focus you on there and move you to that seat, and then we bring someone else in and replace them.
So I've got a question, because I think that right person, wrong seat is actually quite a comfortable position to be in. It's just, you're really good, we just need to move you somewhere else. I think one of the uncomfortable parts is the wrong person in the right seat, where there's somebody who doesn't follow your core values, but their ability is actually suitable for the business. They might get what you're doing, might really want that thing. Have you experienced that yet? Have you come across that yet?
No, I've had a wrong person, wrong seat, and
okay.
and that's easier. Well, I mean, it's a difficult situation to navigate, but I haven't had a wrong person, right seat. Although I can clearly see other organisations I've been in where there have been many. I've experienced wrong people, right seats, and seen how the organisation has dealt with them or not.
Funny, isn't it? Yeah. Like you can see in sort of all businesses, you can see the EOS problems that it's kind of raising to you, and it's kind of going, look, have you got this problem? You can see that in businesses all around, can't you? And see the challenges that could be solved through adopting EOS and using those principles.
So have you had to deal with that?
Not yet, no. But we've had right person, wrong seat. A couple of times we had wrong person, wrong seat.
Yeah. I can. So in my previous career, I trained with Deloitte, and so I've been an accountant through and through. And I can remember there was a big push around kind of values and what we stood for and what was important. For a while, everyone was just paying lip service to it, because there were a lot of very senior people who were very, very good at their jobs and bringing in loads of money, but weren't aligned with those values, and nothing was happening to them. And then there was a change in the leadership, and then those people suddenly started leaving, and that had a huge impact on the organisation, because you're like, okay, these values do actually mean something. So I've kind of experienced it when people have got rid of them, have kind of managed out that situation, and it is so important, because otherwise your values don't really mean anything if you don't act on them.
It's really interesting, because actually I think I've been there myself, but I think it's harder in a bigger business. The more staff you have, the harder it is to permeate that throughout the business, and even know that people are following the values, and you'll be able to record and track against that. So the next component, Kat, is data. How do you see sort of that component aligning with your firm? How does that show itself, and the data component, what you do in that?
Yeah, so again, I think with all of these things, it's a journey. We can do more of it. We started by implementing a weekly scorecard for the business as a whole, and that fed into the weekly SLT meetings that I have. And again, the scorecard's evolved over time, but we've tried to focus it on 3 main areas, and we've got a few score KPIs that we track for each of those. So it's around getting leads into the business, converting those leads into opportunities, and then actually the delivery of the work. So we've got kind of some KPIs against each of those. And then more recently, we've now got like a delivery team scorecard that forms part of our weekly delivery team meetings. What's really interesting for that is now they can clearly see it, and we're looking at it each week and talking about it. Those KPIs that weren't where we wanted them to be are like starting to move in the right direction, because everyone can see them. And it's amazing that everyone's getting a lot more invested in a particular one, is like percentage of tasks completed on time. It just means that people are using the systems a lot better. It wasn't necessarily that we weren't doing the work on time, it's just that we weren't tracking it correctly, so we couldn't see. And so now they are, doing it.
So there's almost 2 parts to a scorecard, isn't there? There's having that scorecard, which is what basically the EOS data piece is about. It's about having everybody in the business having a KPI against themselves, and then as a team looking at KPIs across the board and things. But then there's a second bit, which is, okay, how do you get the data to be able to put that onto that scorecard accurately, and it's not going to take forever? So are you using from an accounting perspective, are you using a tool to manage, to get those, what CRM are you using, or is it Carbon Center? What are you using to help you get that information?
Yeah, because we don't think of ourselves as an accountancy business per se, we don't have a practice management system in that way. So we use HubSpot as our CRM, and then we have been using Expert. So that kind of tracks all our tasks and things. So we get our task completion stats from there. We get kind of sales and opportunities from HubSpot, and then we use Float, the time tracking tool, for kind of utilization and timesheets and things. So we put it from there.
Between those, you're getting the data out you need to create those scorecards on your percentage of time, your percentage of class completed on time, those sorts of things.
Yes, there's probably more we could do to automate it, but so it takes, I don't know, it takes like 15 minutes to pull the stats together each week, so it's not crazy amounts of time.
So we've got the kind of data piece then. What about the next step, which is the issues side of things? Because you talked about doing level 10 meetings, didn't you? And
yeah.
Sort of doing that. Are you doing the right, the normal structure, the pure structure, or are you creating your own structure, or what are you doing in that, and how are you connecting that with your issues?
Yeah, so we are. I almost have an issue with the fact that it's called issues, because I find that people don't know what to put in it, because they're like, oh, well, that's not an issue, that's not like a big problem. They almost think because it's issues, it's got to be something bad. And we're trying to do a piece around, particularly with the rest of the team, it's like, it doesn't necessarily have to be that there's a big problem or I don't know, something terrible's happened to go on the issues list. It could be a variety of other things that is just useful to talk about how we can change something, improve it. Don't know, how do you use it? It might be I think
it's a really valid point. I think we've really evolved how we think about issues, because we started with that sort of mindset of an issue is something that's wrong in the business that we need to fix, and then so it's evolved into what you take out of a SWOT analysis effectively. So sometimes it's a long-term issue which might be a threat. We need to it's not an issue, it's a threat that needs mitigating at some point. Like your biggest client it's not for us at the moment, but if our biggest client was 50% of our revenue, that becomes an issue in long-term issues. At some point we're going to need to mitigate the risk of that issue. If you've got a key person who is about to go on holiday for 3 weeks in 6 months' time, and your business isn't structured for that, luckily EOS makes it a little bit easier, but even then you still might not have everything in place, and they might have key relationships and all that kind of stuff. How do you mitigate that? So those sorts of things. But then we also add in opportunities. So if we think there's in our sales and marketing meetings, we're looking at, okay, what's the opportunity we see ahead, and we might not be able to deal with that opportunity right now, but that goes into our issues list ready to when we've got time to deal with that, because I know our focus is able to do that. We know that opportunity is something that we can delve into and explore in that as well. So we're trying to use it more as like the SWOT tool, but you're putting it into the issues, and we split it between short and long term. So short term generally we should really look at this every single week, and long term is we're looking at those in our quarterly conversations, annual meetings, where it's kind of a bigger issue. Is this something that's ready now? Should we be solving this? But I think there's also a timing to some of those issues, where some issues it's not a now issue, but there's a deadline on it. Like, for example, you need to redo your self-assessment process. Well, you're not going to do it before the end of January, so therefore, if you do self-assessments, that's going to be February, March time. You're probably going to go and review that process. So there's a slot that you have to do that in, and then you put a timing onto those issues. So we found that we're very much looking to try and just throw every conversation piece into there. So you said you've evolved. How's yours evolved at the moment? Then how are you tracking, managing that issues list, etc.?
So I think we do something similar to you. So we've got a SLT kind of issues list that forms our weekly SLT meetings. And again, we put, whenever an issue or it's almost like a thought comes up, we now just chuck it in the inbox that we call it. And then at the weekly meeting, we'll go through that inbox, and we'll either be, okay, this is something that we should pick up as part of a weekly meeting. Or this is a longer term one in case we put it into like our vision traction box, which means we'll then look at it at the next quarterly, and then we work through, prioritise, pick the top 3 for the weekly meeting and see where we get to. And then we've got a separate one that's that issues list for the delivery team meeting. And that's something that we've only just started doing recently. So from the beginning of the year, we've started doing a delivery level 10 meeting with that issues list and that kind of level 10 structure. And I got very excited on Monday, because it was the first time one of the team put something on the issues list, because up until then it was all it was all coming from me, but now like one of the team got it and put a really good point on. So I'm like, yes, it feels like it's starting to embed and flow down rather than be me driven. It's the team starting to drive it. So that was really cool.
Obviously, so the idea of issues is there's three components in EOS, isn't there? There's issue. It's called IDS. So issue, discuss, solve. So are you doing those three components with your whole team, your SLT, your senior leadership team? Like, who are you doing that with, that issue solving process with?
So it depends, what list it is on. But we're trying to go through that process. Like, again, we're not doing it perfectly. But we get to the point where there is an action that needs to be taken in relation to that issue, and then that goes on our to-do list that we then revisit at the start of next meeting. So we are kind of following that structure. I find it, I don't know how you find this, but we do often get sidetracked and go down bits of rabbit holes and stuff when we're discussing the issues. Like we're nowhere near as good as like it talks about in the book as how you should do it. We often get a bit sidetracked.
I think it's 100% a learning process, and I think that the more you do it, the more you get comfortable as a team going tangent.
Yeah.
So effectively, when you say that, obviously you can kind of stop. You're trying to tell the team we're going off track here. One thing that really helped us was we went to the annual conference for EOS, and they do an open IDS session where people throw their issues up, and one of the implementers will issue solve in the room. And it's really good to watch the simplicity, but also quite focused efforts for that. So I think the biggest problem we had was between issue and discuss. We ended up discussing our issues a lot rather than really figuring out so the first step is what is the issue you've got at hand, and really spending time delving into what is the actual issue here. And I think once you get to the root of that, because often the issue that gets put down is a symptom of the actual true underlying issue. It might be your issue is that there's some issue with a customer of some sort, but actually fundamentally it might boil down into that's actually a staff member who doesn't want to be in that role, or it's fundamentally a process issue where there's something that isn't quite going, your processes aren't quite right to mitigate whatever that potential symptom is. So talking about processes, why do you think process is important? And what do you know of the EOS process, and how much of that are you doing, using, etc.?
I'd say we've got loads of processes, but we haven't, I don't think, done the kind of the EOS way of doing processes. We haven't thought about what our core processes are and got those clearly documented. I feel we've got bits of things all over the place rather than thought about it in the way that they have in EOS. So that's one of our rocks for this. Well, one of our rocks for this quarter is to figure out what our core processes, the areas of our core processes are going to be, and then we're going to tighten them up next quarter. But I'm a big believer in the importance of process because, like you were saying at the start, unless you have those processes, it's very difficult for you to step out of the business to grow and scale in the way that you want to, because
for sure. I think the bigger you get, the more it shows those gaps, and the more important it becomes to look at those processes. Sometimes, for example, I think as accountants we get very good at the delivery process of how are we delivering the service. So for yourself, that'll be the fractional stuff. How do you deliver the fractional finance to somebody? What's the process of the meetings, agendas, etc.? You can do all of that, gets sorted quite nicely, delivering management accounts, etc. But then you rarely think about your business processes, don't you? Which is sort of, what's the HR process if somebody is off sick for X period of time and it's longer than you'd expect, they might not be coming back to work. How do you recruit somebody, and what's the specific recruitment process to find out what a good new FD is going to be for the business, those sorts of things. I think it's a challenge. There's actually, EOS has a really good book. EOS has a book called Process, which basically talks through the process side of things. And it's quite valuable. I said it's really good, but actually I think it's probably the weakest of the EOS books. Have you read many of the EOS?
Yes, I feel like a bit of a geek. So I've read Traction. I haven't fully read Process. I kind of got halfway through it and thought I should almost read it alongside doing it, I thought. But I've read most of them. The book I loved the most actually was Get a Grip. I found that was really helpful because it kind of tells, I guess, a story of people implementing EOS. I got things from it in terms of how it should be done in a way that I didn't when I was just reading Traction, because Traction is almost like the manual of how to implement it. Get a Grip added the flavour and the colour around it to help us figure some things out, because we haven't had an implementer help us or anything like that.
I think that's probably a good way of describing those two books. Actually, just so this might help people if they're thinking about like EOS and going, okay, where do I start in these processes? We've obviously talked there about Traction, which is sort of the first place to start. Don't listen to an Audible, get it in a book format. It's a bit like like you say, the manual, isn't it? And then you've got the Get a Grip book, which is very much more of a storytelling of what's going on, so you can sort of see it in stories if you prefer that sort of learning. They've got a couple of other books on their website, some specifically for the team, so not necessarily the leadership, but for the people around you that kind of you want to take on this journey of we're implementing something new. Some also for just the leadership team, about how to be a good boss and things like that. So there's a couple of different ones, and there's one that my favourite one is actually the people one, because I actually think it's really, really valuable to hear how to implement some of the people stuff, because ultimately I think that's the most important part of any business. I found that book really, really interesting and really useful as well in that process. Have you managed to read that one yet?
Called?
The People.
It's actually just called People. No, I haven't got that one.
It is, I've got it somewhere. People Dare to Build an Intentional Culture.
Oh, no.
So it's on the EOS website, eosworldwide.com. It's under the resources section. There's a list of books there, which are quite good. Okay, and then I guess we go on to that. That kind of leads us nicely onto our final component of the 6 components. We've done vision, people, data, issues, process, and then traction, which is obviously what everyone wants.
Yeah. I think the traction is all about, I guess, my interpretation of it is all about the meeting, the cadence of getting this running through your business, so it's not just an exercise that you do an off-site, like because you want to implement it. It actually becomes embedded in your business. And I find the meeting cadence in particular, the weekly meetings, whether that's your SLT or in other teams within the business, the quarterly cycles, and the thinking about what objectives or rocks you want to set for the upcoming quarter, and then keeping on track, checking in to see if you're delivering on those. And then the annual, really, really useful. I'd actually used the rock concept before I'd come to EOS. It was something that I used in my job beforehand in terms of setting those quarterly goals. And I find that really, really valuable to kind of keep us on track and keep us moving forward. I don't think we'd have scaled in the way that we have if we hadn't had that cadence. I completely agree.
Yeah. I think it's Peter Drucker, isn't it? I think it said what you measure, what you measure you manage, and what you manage you, I can't remember the exact term, but basically you improve that effectively. So it's the traction piece is really about making sure. I think the meeting cadence is a really important part, and I think the ideal hopefully is that, like you've said there, there's a scale piece to that. There's an end point that's going to help you achieve those goals that you set in the vision component, and you're actually going to achieve something from it. One thing we found actually is, which I've spoken to a lot of EOSers now about, is there's an expectation that you implement EOS and instantaneously you'll get traction, which is quite interesting. Whereas actually what I've found is that you implement EOS, especially if you're in an established business, there's so much change going on that actually there's almost like a delay in that traction piece. It almost takes until you've really embedded it, and then suddenly you get the traction. Especially if getting that sort of, what is the vision component really tight and really well defined, and then following through on those with that sort of meeting cadence, etc., and achieving that, moving towards those, kind of takes time to build and sort of build that momentum a bit like a snowball. I don't know how you've experienced
Well, I guess because we kind of implemented it almost from the get-go, so I don't really know, and we were kind of growing, so I didn't really get that, because fortunately, touch wood, we've kind of been growing and scaling like the whole way along, because like we kind of started, launched, scaling, had traction, and we've implemented EOS and been scaling. Yeah, I am 100% confident though that we wouldn't have grown at the rate that we had if we hadn't put it in from the start. I'm sure of that.
EOS advertised that it's for the Entrepreneurial Operating System, is for businesses that are either 2 million turnover or 10 plus people. When you started, how many people did you have initially? Was it just you and the founder, or
there was, yeah, 2 of us.
So you implemented it pretty quickly. So how's that EOS journey been? Because obviously, even yesterday I was speaking to somebody and they were like, "Oh, we've got 6 people. It's too early for us." So what would you say to those people? What's been your experience of that implementation process?
I mean, I guess there are some elements that I'm sure if someone were to, like an experienced EOS person was to come in and look at what we were doing, there's loads of things that we're not doing fully in line with the process and lots of room for improvement, and some things that are just difficult to do because we don't have that size behind us. But I firmly believe that all of the different areas that we've talked through, those 6 components, they have elements to them that are applicable to all businesses that you can use to help set you up at whatever stage you're at. I think it's applicable to everyone, and it's actually I'm such a fan of the book and just the useful bits that you can get from it, that when we start working with a new client, I send them a copy of Traction just to give them as like a welcome gift so they can read it, and every single one of them has fed back that there's something that they're taking from it, even though they're earlier stage businesses. They're like, oh yeah, scorecard, we weren't doing that, or we weren't thinking about the KPI, the data in the right way, or whatever it was. So I think it's applicable to all businesses, and I wonder whether, I don't know, I sometimes think that if you put stuff off, it's, you're like, oh well, we're not big enough for this, we're not there yet. I don't know, I think just get stuck in and do it like straight away. That's my take.
Yeah, so what I've taken from what you said there is really it's about, even if you can't do the whole of EOS because it might not be relevant or might be a bit overkill, like there's principles you can take from every component of that are going to benefit your business, and then over time, as you evolve and get bigger, you're going to sort of perhaps take a bit more on if it's relevant and sort of build from that. Is that pretty much what you say?
Yeah, exactly. So when, not until the start of this year, when there was more of us in the kind of the delivery doing team, did we have those meetings and then them look at the numbers. When there was just one person, I didn't bother doing that because it didn't make sense. It was just me and Pete having the meetings. So yes, you summarised it very well. Thank you.
So how many are in your team at the moment then?
We are up to 7, 8, soon to be 8. Yeah.
Okay, so we, in a couple of the later episodes, we're speaking with accountants from different parts of the world, actually. So Canada and other places. We are covering topics around sort of delving deeper into this vision, people, etc. Some of those firms are very large firms, sort of 100, they've had 100 people, they're now down to 60 or whatever, because through EOS they've actually shrunk a little bit. How do you see the journey of an accountancy firm moving? Because obviously you're in that initial phase, you're fast-growing startup business. How do you see somebody taking that on board and solving challenges? Or what are the challenges that's going to help solve in that journey?
So what are the challenges that EOS is going to help to solve as we grow? Yeah. So I think the ability to consistently present ourselves to clients or the outside world by having those core processes so everyone has the same experience, that's going to be fundamental. And I think, so in terms of our business in particular, each of our clients has got a CFO that's assigned to them and then people beneath them. And I think there's the danger that the CFOs will take it in based on in the way that best fits them and how they work. And we've got, one of our values is one voice, many accents, that I stole from someone else. And I think that's going to be really important as we scale, to make sure there's a consistency. Like, we're all individuals and can bring our own bits, but there is a consistent way of Fractional delivering stuff, of the way Fractional talks and interacts with clients. So I think that bit around, I guess that picks on all of the bits, because there's the vision piece in terms of the values, there's the processes piece, there's the making sure we've got the right people. I think that's going to be one of our biggest challenges, and how EOS is going to help us.
Because what you're effectively doing is you're bringing experts together in a team, or people that have got years and years of experience most likely, and then they've got to sort of fall in line to some degree to your way of working, because the customer is that consistent approach. Yeah, I believe we will have the exact same challenges as you. I think it's a common challenge. I think when you're trying to scale that advisory piece, is that it's finding people that are going to effectively say the same things as you. Well, I don't think they have to be the exact same. I think you can there are so many different skills an FD needs, and not every FD is going to have every one of those skills. Some FDs, their strategies weaker, but their numbers are fantastic. Others, they're great at telling stories with that data, but perhaps the detail, they need to get somebody else in to support, and in a team to support the detail side of things. So there's loads of different FD qualities that people can have, and I don't think I've ever met an FD that has all of them. There's room for that individualistic approach, but at the same time, things like meeting agendas, things like the presentation of information, all that kind of stuff. You're going to want some element of consistency in these approaches, aren't you?
Yeah, and just I guess the way of thinking and the ethos and things. And I'm not even saying, I don't even think it will necessarily, it's always got to be the same as what it is now. I think it will evolve. But what I want us to do is like, almost as every CFO comes in, we'll all get mixed into the pot and the pot will change. But we might shift that way, but we all shift that way together. I'm doing a visual thing on a podcast, which doesn't work. So you might have different people coming in with different ideas that take you in a slightly different direction, but you all need to move together rather than having outliers going off in different directions.
Makes a lot of sense. Fundamentally then, what do you think are the biggest challenges? One of them is obviously that if you're doing advisory, one of the challenges is that obviously some people in here listening to this are going to do advisory, some people are going to do full fractional, some people are going to have just compliance. What do you think is what are the biggest challenges you think that are shared by all of these firms coming up in the next sort of, you mentioned AI, but is that the biggest, or over the next 12 to 24 months, what do you think the biggest challenge is going to face firms?
I definitely think AI, it can't not be people challenges in some way, because that's ultimately what we are. We're teams of people, and their knowledge and skills is what we are selling into businesses. So whether that is a retention recruitment type challenge, which I know lots of people do struggle with, I think EOS has got a place there. Yeah, so how you making sure that they're aligned, training them, retaining them, that element of it, I think that will be a big challenge.
Do you think EOS can help with that, or do you think that's just completely separate from EOS? Do you think there's something that can support with?
No, I definitely think it can. I feel like a lot of the reasons why I have, if I think about my previous life when I was an employee, the reasons why I haven't stayed with a firm or why it hasn't worked is maybe they weren't clear on their vision and what they wanted to achieve, and therefore I couldn't see it and get behind it and feel connected with it. And then I also think there's an element of, when you're clear on that, then you make sure you've got the right people and you've got that A team. If you're not clear on that and using that in your business, I don't think you'll attract and be able to have the A team. And I don't think if the firms that are going to do really well in the future are those that have got that A team in their business. So I think it will help you get closer to that A team quicker.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with you on that one. I think that's people is probably going to be the biggest challenge, because the market looks very much like it's going to split a little bit between sort of the AI-driven compliance side of things, and then the people that go deep, the big firms that go deeper into people and into that kind of, okay, what can AI not give, and what can we offer that's not the automation piece? I think you'll have, but then to do that, you need the very good people. So you need those A players, as you term them. There's people that are going to align with your values and meet client expectations as part of that.
Yeah. Do you think there's something else as well? What else do you see as issues?
I'll tell you what, we'll do one more. I would say that the lack of talent, and it's linked to that, but the lack of talent in being developed in the UK is a challenge. And I'm part of that challenge as well. I'm not saying I'm solving that. But at the moment, there's so few people entering in as accountants, and then the training at the early stages is so limited in terms of it. It's very much data driven. It's not the training that gets done at that level. Even if you go to multiple divisions, multiple places in a business like the Big Four try and do, there's very few people coming out with truly useful experience that will help at the higher end in the FD level without having worked in industry. I think that's a challenge. So then what's happening is there's a lot of outsourcing to India, South Africa, Philippines, etc., Romania as part of that. But that's doing is that's removing the need for all the hiring in the UK, and therefore there's what would have been training in the past. You now can get a really good person for the same price, outsourced, which means we're not getting the training happening. Which means I can see in the next 20, 30 years there being a massive gap. So it's not the short term, but longer term, massive gap in training. So moving somebody that is a very good management accountant, for example, into an FD role is going to be very difficult, because just because you're a good management accountant doesn't make you a good FD, because a good FD requires a higher skill set. So I think from a hiring perspective, what it means is you've got the firms that are going down the advisory route who really, really need to think about how they nurture talent, or there's going to be a bit of a war over talent at that top end, versus the firms that maybe perhaps remains through economies of scale model, through AI and things like that, and those sorts of firms. I think we'll find that you will have a lot more of the sort of entry-level staff will cut their teeth in those firms, but may not necessarily get the experience they need of like the variety of businesses and the breadth, because AI is going to do a lot of that thinking for them. I think that's my concern anyway. In terms of the connection with the EOS, I guess it's just it helps you to know what you are and what you're not. So when you are making those hiring decisions, I don't think it's going to solve that problem long term, but I think it will help give you the best chance of hiring the right person throughout that journey. So if you've been listening to this and you've got this far, then obviously EOS is at least of interest to you. So we've got 7 more episodes coming up. 6 of them are going to cover each of the individual components. So that was vision, people, data, issues, process and traction. We'll be seeing the likes of Chad Davis, has built a firm to over 100 people in Canada, and then through EOS has evolved and guided that firm, and now runs that firm remotely from an RV. And we're also going to speak to Kelvin, who we're going to discuss around the people component and delve in a little bit more some of these conversations we're having here, and so on throughout the rest of the series. Why should you listen to this again? If you want to delve deeper, this is a really good place to do it. Now, we've talked about some resources already. We mentioned about some of the books, and Kat's mentioned some of her favourites. I've mentioned you can get them on the EOS website. But we're going to delve into more of the tools we've explained and go a bit deeper into what EOS is in each of those components, and some stories around that as well, sort of how's that practically been implemented into those firms. So to conclude though, Kat, tell me a bit about your final thoughts on sort of why is EOS relevant for the accounting industry, and what, if people are listening here, why should they pay attention to what we're talking about here?
Because regardless of industry, but like say accountancy, it's really important that we as leaders of those businesses think of them as businesses and spend time growing them, spend time working on the business rather than just in the business. And EOS, for me, gave me the framework that I needed to allow me to work on the business in the way that I needed to get where I want to, well, where I am now and where I want to be in the future.
Working on the business instead of in it. Well, thanks very much, Kat. Really appreciate that. So we are going to run these 7 more sessions, as I said. If you would like to subscribe to the channel, please do. It's Traction Talks. Please also share a review of how you thought. And if you've got any thoughts, comments, or questions as well that we can cover in later episodes, please let us know. Other than that, thank you very much for your time for listening. And this is Traction Talks, and I've been Kieran James.